Good morning. This is Carl Dakin. This is the Successful Funding Show. Today, unlike most days, this is not being broadcast from my office in Centennial, Colorado, but from Avon, Colorado, which is hosting the state annual economic development conference put on by the Colorado Council for Economic Development. So I'm jumping in and out of that conference as a member of the organization and talking with all the different economic developers across the state of Colorado about their current concerns, continuing challenges, and issues. And as you might suspect, funding is not only a constant challenge for these people, but a lot of the money that's poured downhill from the feds over the last few years is running out. And there are programs that have been put in motion which do not have any source of sustainable or continuing funding. And so the challenge is getting greater if they want to maintain or continue some of these programs that were initiated with these federal dollars. But that's a topic that we'll dive into for another day. I have with me today Kon Apostolopoulos. I'm not sure how close that was, but um, yeah, he's going to give me a bronze star, not a silver or a gold star for that one. But Kon runs his own business, FreshBiz Solutions, and he does consulting on improving productivity of your teams, trying to get the company to be all it can be by letting the people within that organization be all they can be. And we're going to talk about a question that commonly comes up in funding, which is all too often when you're raising funding, you may have already exhausted everybody you know, and now it's time to move on to people you don't know. And because you don't know them, you don't have that necessary level of trust, understanding of capability, the things that go into the decision making of the investor. And so you want to get there in a hurry. You're saying, yes, I met this person today. I want the check today. If I can't get the check today, could I get it yesterday? If I can't get it yesterday, how about tomorrow? And in that, the question then becomes, well, now if there is a legitimate match, meaning that there may be the potential of a funding event take place, what will it take to let the two people form a relationship, elevate the trust to a level that will support an investment decision and go forward? So with that, Kon, please introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about your background. Feel free to put in a plug for your consulting services, and and then we'll jump into this topic, which is a topic that will always be here because we'll always be looking to set up new relationships, and most of them we'd prefer to get down to business instead of dancing or dating for weeks, days, months, years, whatever.
Straight to the point, my friend. Straight to the point. I love it. No wasted time. Well, good morning, Carl. It's a pleasure to be here with you, my friend. It's a pleasure to join you again on your show and to engage with your amazing audience. Uh, I am Solutions, as Carl mentioned earlier. My job is basically to help my clients develop leaders at all levels and create a plan, a people plan, if you will, that will support their business plan. They all have wonderful ideas as far as strategies and what they want to do, but it's not worth the paper it's written on if they don't have the people to execute it. So my role is to make sure that those people are ready, willing, and able to follow along to execute the plan at all levels of the organization. And that's where the true success and the magic happens, my friend. Now, part of the reason why I believe that you and I started this conversation is because we are both required very often as we meet new people, new clients, to start building trust. Business development for all of us means relationship development, and relationship development requires a foundation of trust. Whether it's a long cycle or a short cycle out of necessity, we still need to build that trust, because people will do business with those they know, like, and trust.
Yeah, and it's kind of another way of looking at it, since you deal with teams and I would call it the permanent players that are on the roster. When you get ready to do fundraising, you're going to go in two directions. One, you're going to add people to your team who are potential temporary players on your team because they're contractors who are bringing outside knowledge, capability, services, contacts, and so forth to the capital campaign.
Mm.
At the same time, you want to engage or develop these new relationships with investor candidates, and you want to do that in a hurry. I mean, it's logical, rational to want to be there quicker, but at the same time, trust has to be earned. I think that's the correct phrase,
Yeah.
and it isn't instantaneous. Now, I do admit that occasionally I'll bump into someone, and before the end of the conversation, we're all looking forward to the next conversation because we're enjoying each other's company. We appreciate each other's abilities. We have common interest and looking forward to teaming up on a project and moving forward. But more often than not, it's more a game of who is this person? I have to check them out. I need to vet them. I need to investigate their background and see if they're the proper person or something. But
Yeah.
before we get into that, this is an interactive show, and that means that we allow, and not only allow, but encourage people to participate in the show from the audience. We have a number of people already online this morning. I'll call out Zach Dane. Zach is developing a new method of investing in real estate that's called fractional ownership, which both allows entrepreneurs to find funding for projects that they might not find otherwise. But at the same time, it's breaking the investment down to bite-sized pieces so that the average Joe or Jane can participate as an investor under investment crowdfunding, and opens up the capital market to more opportunities. So thanks, Zach, for being with us this morning. Then go to Don Cohen. Don is the Don, I now call him the Don of LinkedIn, who knows more about LinkedIn than I'll probably ever learn. I'm learned a ton, but it's not my goal to be the end-all expert. That's Don's job, role, goal in life. And he is advising both Kon and myself on the use of LinkedIn as a tool for building our brand, sharing information about what we know to a larger audience in a kind of a pay-it-forward approach. And it's an ongoing learning curve. It isn't a day go by that we don't learn one more thing about using this wonderful tool for communicating with the rest of the world. And then we have Omar. Omar has his own show, Zoom Party, and I probably pronounced that worse than Khan's last name, but we'll our way through that. He actually does a couple different shows, and he invited me to be a guest on one of them a few weeks ago, which is "What is your life?" kind of a thing, or who the heck is this person that is running around and doing all these different things. So Omar says, "Good morning, guys. Great to see you both." Omar, thanks for joining us. And you can look up Omar on LinkedIn or Don Cohen. And this is one of the great things about LinkedIn. It's probably one of the best, most up-to-date directories of anybody that you may need to know or want to work with. And back to our topic of the day in terms of how do we know that somebody can be trusted? One of the things that you can do, and which I commonly do before I meet someone, I'm told I'm going to be introduced, is I go to their LinkedIn profile and I zip through it. And I get offers to connect on a daily basis, or people wanting me to go watch this or sign up for that or write them a check. And the first thing I commonly do now is I just go to LinkedIn, I pull up their name, and I see who they are. And in doing that, I now get a quick picture or summary of who they are, where they've been, and if it shows in their their profile that they've never posted ever, I typically just discount and discard them and move on, because to me they're saying that they're going to sit and wait and watch. They're not active or engaged. And I like engaged people because they're the ones who get stuff done. They're the ones who I depend upon to do stuff when I can't do it or to team with someone. I also look at their background and go, where do they work? And if they tell me that they're the world's greatest this, that, or the other, but they've only worked in that job 2 months, I typically will get skeptical about that particular statement about their attributes. And I may or may not, though, decide to invite them in. I'm particularly open to students or connecting with students who are building their career, building their portfolio. And I understand they don't have this long history, long work experience. But you'll often see people, you look at their background and it's confusing. And I won't claim that mine isn't a little chaotic. But in that regard, this is another way to try to figure out who are you talking to, where have they been, what have they done, what would be reasonable experiences for them. Because one of the other problems I often have with people is somebody will make a statement that they accomplished something, and we both know that they probably meant they and somebody else in a team accomplished something. And whereas this person, the point person, the lead person, the heavy actor, or were they an assistant to the physician or the scrub nurse, or were they the janitor who simply cleaned the building while somebody else was doing the work? So these are all questions to ask, and these are I'll call it techniques that I use to start my evaluation process of somebody from a non-interactive mode, where I'm just trying to get background information, which I will use when we talk. So, Con, what is your common starting point when you want to figure out who somebody is?
It's funny. I'm just keeping my notes here because you unleashed some gems out there, my friend. So I figured that I would keep note because I think it's going to make our discussion a lot richer with this process. Good morning to our friends as well. Now that they're all here, this is the beautiful thing about having a show like this. It's an example of trust building. When you trust people to engage, when you invite them into this is an example of trust building at its finest, if you may. And it's a technique that, as you mentioned, we've learned a lot from the Don himself about how to do this. Let's start unpacking things a little bit. I mean, I'm going to approach it from a people coaching management process. I'm going to take it from the human side, if you will. When I have executives that I coach that ask me, how do I increase my trust level with others? How do I get people to trust me? The answer is very simple. The answer that comes to mind automatically is be more trustworthy. And the way you become more trustworthy is first and foremost and most basically do what you say you're going to do. When you have a consistency between your words and actions, that creates trust. People may not always like it, but they will trust it. They know that they can take that to the bank. When they know that you will do what you say you're going to do, that is the foundation for all trust building from that perspective. So that's the biggest thing. And over time, that has a way of building on itself, because the best predictor of future behavior is past behavior. One of the things that you are you're referring to, is very kindred to what we call behavioral-based interviewing. When we start looking at how people have behaved in the past, that's a good indicator for us of how they're going to behave in similar situations in the future. So when we are interviewing somebody, when we're talking with somebody, whether it's to hire them on our team, whether it's somebody that I'm interviewing as a partner, somebody that I'm going to hire to do a job for me, whether it's someone that I'm looking to collaborate and work with, I should be doing my due diligence. It's very reasonable to ask questions. It's very reasonable to say, okay, Can you give me an example of where you've dealt with this situation in the past? How did you deal with that? What did you do? What was the result? And so we're looking for information about that. To your point, if somebody comes and tells me I was the top salesperson in my company, that may sound very impressive, if you will. But when I look up their profile or when I dig a little bit deeper and I find out that they were the only person in their, the only salesperson in their company, I'm going to look at that very differently. Or if I was a backbencher on the project team that did this, it's hard to say that I was really responsible for the results. So we want to be able to get down to the crux of things, down into truly what the real story was. And so ultimately, what I'm trying to figure out, the way that I try to get that information from somebody to build that image that I have of them is by collecting what we call stars. Now, STAR is an acronym. It stands for ST stands for situation or task that I'm asking about. A stands for action, the action specifically that this person took. R is the result that came of those actions. So in any given situation, I'm trying to collect stars that are relevant to my discussion in order for me to understand more about this person's behavior. It Once we get beyond the people that we know intimately, what are we looking for? We're looking for evidence that this person is consistent with what they're saying. I mean, you go online to buy a coffee cup and you look at it, you're going to look at the reviews. You're going to look at it. Yeah, you're going to look at anything out there. Part of what we do, part of why these reviews are so important to us. You get into an Uber, you go to a restaurant, you go wherever, you're looking for reviews. What do those reviews represent? Because I haven't been there, because I haven't engaged with this person or this business, I'm looking for proof, social proof that this person is who they say they are. This restaurant delivers what they say they're going to deliver. This product is as good as advertised. That's how we start trying to accelerate the trust building. And so we look for that social proof. So we either look for it through questioning ourselves if we can, and if we can't, we rely on others, either on a cumulative basis or from people we trust from referrals to say, yep, this person is legitimate, or this entity, this business is someone you should be doing business with. And that's ultimately what we're looking for. I mean, that is a big part of our trust building, at least on a relationship level, on a collaboration level. Now, let's start with that. And I'd love to get your thoughts on how you've applied these kind of techniques.
Well, I will share a little bit of information that when I was on Omar's show, he didn't ask me a question about this, so I didn't reveal this from my history. I'm a licensed attorney. I went through law school for 3 years and I worked my way through law school. I had to earn the money to pay for the massive tuition. And during my last 2 years in law school, I was the official county consumer fraud investigator for Shawnee County in Topeka, Kansas. I carried a badge. I walked around. I took complaints. I investigated stuff. And one of the things that I learned early in this job position was what we called patterns of conduct. And as you described it, if somebody cheated somebody, you would look to see if they cheated somebody before. Because if they did, then this is a cheat. You put the label with them and they're a bad guy, and we would deal with them as we would deal with all bad guys. We would try to, one, protect the public, and two, part of that was to prevent this person from harming anybody going into the future. Occasionally you would get somebody who had cheated someone, but it wasn't a bad action. It wasn't out of a bad conduct or lack of ethics or a lack of respect for someone. They just goofed up. And so you had to talk to both sides. You had to talk to the person making the complaint and the person who was being complained about. And sometimes they'd tell you something, you're like, do you realize that that was wrong? And they're going, yeah, I do now. And you put them on the path, and they're going to be okay. they make some kind of compensation to the person who got harmed, but you move on. But you would regularly find people who don't respect other people. They don't belong into society, as we call it. They were constantly cheating, cutting corners, and lying, outright lying, stealing, the definition you would use, whether it's white collar crime or it's just straight up property
Yeah.
theft.
Mhm.
And what I found out is that it was harder to judge younger people because they didn't have a track record. But anytime you see somebody older in life who's accused of a serious crime, whether it's theft, abuse of another person, or whatever, I automatically start looking for pattern recognition of, is this a pattern of conduct? Because if they did it today, in all likelihood, they've been doing it their entire life.
Mhm.
And in reverse here, we're now talking about, well, what are the good characteristics of someone we're looking for? Or if they are overstating who they are, you're going, well, if they're lying to me about what a great salesperson they are, imagine what happens if on my behalf, they're going to go out and lie about my
Mhm.
products or services. And who do you think is going to catch the heat on that particular misconduct? Me.
Yep.
And I have no interest in that. And one of the other things I also learned early in life, because I deal with raising funding, as a lot of people know, not all deals work out. Not every investment pays back. I have more failures in my lifetime than most people will collect in 100 people because I deal with so many high risk propositions. And when you're doing that, everybody goes, well, did it fail because they cheated or because the deal didn't work?
Mhm.
And so you have to manifest all the different things that people want to see and do to say they gave it their best effort. It was a good effort. It didn't work. That's okay, we'll move on. If they get anything in their head that you took too much money out, you lied about something, you failed to disclose something, then you get a black mark. And in my industry, that can be the kiss of death. You're pretty much over at that point in time
Mhm.
because you're viewed as being a high person who has to be as honest and full disclosure, transparent as can be, or you don't get to play the game again.
Mhm.
I find that whole concept of that, but it occurred to me as you were describing it that when we're talking about the honesty of the entrepreneur, we also need to talk about the honesty, the trustworthiness of the investor.
Mhm.
It's a regular occasion for me for somebody to come and tell me that they're ready to invest, they've got all this money, and it turns out it's a complete lie. And you're like, why would they tell me that? What joy or benefit do they get out of telling me that they've got all this money to invest when they don't? It's a complete waste of everybody's time, but it's still a puzzle to me why someone would spend so much time and energy misrepresenting themselves. But interviewing an entrepreneur, interviewing an investor candidate is going to parallel to some degree interviewing a new hire candidate for a business. You're going, we're going to work together for a while. I want a certain level of trust. I want a certain
Mhm.
level of capability on what information is available on one hand. And at the same time, though, if you're going to be an entrepreneur and you know you're going to be raising funding, what can you do to build the stars that Khan's talking about? So when somebody says, well, I don't know if I can trust you, and they go, you open the door and all these stars fall out, and you're going, look, this is me. You can trust me.
Mhm.
I've got all the markings of somebody that you can trust.
Mhm.
So how would you go about building that over time, Khan, to create that aura, that profile that makes you stand out as somebody that's ultra trustworthy?
Well, that process does take time, obviously. I mean, as you mentioned, it takes time to collect all these stars. And it's through the repetition of continuously delivering at or above the expectations of your clients and your partners that you get this kind of feedback and reviews. When every time you ask somebody, well, how's Carl done with this? What's your impression of Carl? And they keep giving glowing remarks. That's an indicator that this person has done a pretty good job. I mean, when everybody says that, occasionally you may find somebody who didn't feel that we did our best with them, or it didn't work out, whatever the case might be. But still, the way that we handled that relationship, the way that we handled that setback, speaks volumes. I mean, probably even more so than when things go well. And from my experience working with you and collaborating with you, my friend, I know that even when an investment doesn't pay out, the way that you handle yourself builds as much trust as anything else, because that is a true indicator of your character rather than the outcome, the focus on that. So to me, there are opportunities that abound. And what is it that people look at? Our track record, what have we done in the past? That is a key indicator from our star perspective. The other thing that people look at is, who have we been associated with? Who do we hang out with? Who have we served in the past? Have other companies that are similar to theirs engaged us? So these are some of the things that people are looking for. They're looking for similarities. I mean, at the end of the day, when you sit at the table at a networking event or like a conference when you're at, what are the first things that you try to establish with people? The similarities. What do we have in common? Those things that we have in common are what bind us, what bring us together, what creates the rapport piece. And if I was to take that even further from a speech recognition pattern of the things that I was taught in my past working to quickly establish rapport or de-escalate issues, one of the first things that you're taught is that people have a way of communicating. And they communicate their preferences and their style, even in the moment, very, very clearly if you're able to recognize that. The two factors that we look at is pace of speech and focus of the conversation. Pace means, is somebody quicker paced in their approach, in the way they're speaking at the pace of the words coming out of their mouth? Or are they more reflective, more introverted, more thoughtful? And as far as the focus goes, are they more focused on things, tasks, results, decisions? Are they focused more on people, relationships, the collaboration of things, how patterns work together? So based on those things, if you recognize the pace and the focus of an individual in your conversation, the more you can align to that. If somebody's a fast-paced talker, pick up your pace if you're not there. You're going to start being able to kind of connect with them a little bit more. If somebody's more thoughtful and you're just going on rattling off, that's going to unsettle the conversation. And so you have to slow your pace down and be much more reflective and get into the rhythm with them. Again, the focus. If you're talking about relationships and how wonderful it is to connect with people, and somebody's saying, I need the check yesterday, you're not focused on the same things. So you want to be able to align the focus and the pace in order to build rapport. The greater the rapport with somebody, instinctively, intuitively, the trust level goes up, because we're recognizing the similarities in our approach to things. And then as you get the chance to talk with somebody a little bit more, you start finding those similarities. Perhaps you go through Omar's questionnaire and all of a sudden they know a lot more about you. And so that's the situation where you start building from a technical standpoint, how you start building a lot of that rapport. Now, people that are good at this, people that instinctively are the kind of people that build rapport very easily, understand that they do this intuitively almost. And it's a pattern of behavior of a communication style that allows them to really connect with people quickly.
Yeah. So one of the things that I advise on and recommend is that as two people come together for the first time, then what you want to do is immediately demonstrate an acknowledgement of the other person, a form of respect for who they are. But I want to jump immediately into the question of, can I be of help to this other person?
Mm-hmm.
And so, quite commonly, you'll see somebody introduce themselves. They'll spend 5 minutes talking about who they are, what they need. I like to reverse that situation. I like to say, yeah, this is my name. But if I don't know them at all, who are you? What are you doing?
Mhm.
And then get immediately my first question will be, well, how might I be of help to you? Or what is something that is challenging you that I might be able to help with? And if I can determine that I might be of assistance or support, if I can bring value to the other person, and the other person believes that I sincerely am trying to help that other person, then I'm immediately getting into the trust circle
Mhm.
that that person may invite me into or adopt me into. And I see this as an error that a lot of people are pitching for funding. They go, I need money. I got to get up and communicate on the stage, on the soapbox, the pitch box, whatever, that they're looking for funding. And I think that they should, one, stop and remember that that's probably assumed, or you wouldn't be in that kind of a conversation. But it doesn't really matter what you want if you're not going to bring value to the person who has the resources you're looking for, because there'll never be a transaction, there'll never be a deal. That's not going to happen. And so
Mhm.
you can tell your story and get turned down, and tell your story and get turned down,
Mhm.
and tell your story again and get turned down. If you're not paying attention to whether or not you're bringing value to the person who's on the other part of the equation.
Mhm.
Um, if you start off with who are you, what, how can I help, what are you doing, and try to be careful in explaining whether you can or cannot be. I mean, you don't know that you can for sure. If you've already known you're going to meet the person, you should have done your due diligence in advance and profiled them and understand where to start the conversation. But if you haven't, you just start talking and you go, well, what do you do? What's your biggest challenge? How do you solve that challenge, and can I play a role in that?
Mhm.
And you may say, yeah, I can help the person, but I don't have time. I don't have the bandwidth to take that on. Or you may say, I could help you, but I know someone who could help you more. And have you met this person? You do an introduction. But I find that the quickest way for me to build trust in a cold call initial contact is to simply dive deep into whatever is their problem of the day, whatever is something that could be turned by my involvement to help them out. And if I can do that, and they believe that I can do that, then we're gonna move closer, quicker, rather than dancing all night long before we decide what we're going to do.
Hmm. So, a couple of things on that. First of all, I mean, to me, what you consider standard practice for you is not so standard for everybody. I mean, you are a servant leader and somebody who is on a mission to help people. Yes, you want to be able to be successful financially, but much of what you do is guided by your internal light and your spirit of wanting to give back, my friend. People recognize that. People see that. Again, we're talking about speech patterns, and I'll add to that the intuition that we have. And the more experienced people are, the more attuned their BS meter is. And so for all of us, we've post COVID, I think we've all gotten to the point now on Zoom calls and everything else where our BS meter is pretty attuned to what's happening out there. So from that perspective, it's obvious that people will trust their intuition from that piece. Now, we think we communicate because we choose fancy words. We think we're communicating well because of our word selection. Our word selection is only 7% of the message that we go that. Studies have shown that the other 93% is truly tone and body language. And so people will instinctively process this. Our brain, our instinctive, our old ancient reptilian brain, our emotional side of things will recognize things 80,000 times faster than our cognitive brain. So before your brain even thinks about understanding logically the words that are coming out of the other person's mouth, your body and being has already responded to that. They know whether they like somebody or not, or whether that BS meter is on high alert or not. So that's the part that we need to recognize. When people are authentic, when there is a consistency between who they are, their intent, and what they're saying, what's coming out of their mouth, then that allows us to be at peace with that. That's where the trust comes in and the consistency that we're talking about. But beyond that, if there are inconsistencies or hints of inconsistency, we're not settled. We need more. We keep digging further and further until we get the answers that will satisfy our intuition. At the end of the day, whether it's somebody who's honest or a cheat, like you were talking about before, we all judge ourselves by our intentions. However, the world judges us by our actions. That's the part that sometimes gets inconsistent. The occasional cheat, the occasional liar doesn't intend to be a bad person, but the world who view them as such, whether they give them a black mark or not, and the kiss of death is a different story, but they will still be able to kind of judge them differently. And so we need to reconcile that. That's where having feedback, having, talking to your clients and the people that you've worked with to give you that referral, that feedback, the public feedback, but also the private feedback, and say, look, yeah, I'm going to put out there that, we had a good partnership, we had a good relationship, but going forward, Carl, here are a couple of things that I think will make you even better. And being able to get to the heart of that from sources that you trust is huge. It's huge. I mean, these are the things that truly help us get better, Carl. Help us create that social proof, that reputation that we have. I mean, I come from a culture that until recently, not much was very digitized. Everything was word of mouth. Everything was reputation. And if you did not have a good reputation in society and community, in the business community and beyond, you were dead in the water. I could see two restaurants side by side serving the same people, the same community, the same kind of food. If the word got out that one place was dirty and their quality of their food was suspect, they would be dead in the water. You would see lines out the door for one restaurant and nobody on the other side. I mean, we see that all the time. That's the trust piece. Why is it that some people are successful that way and others? Because of that consistency between thoughts, speech, actions, all of that. It puts people at ease. And when you consistently deliver what you say you're going to deliver, or even above what you say you're going to deliver, that's where your reputation really shines. That's where people realize that you're bringing value to the relationship, to the equation. And people will seek you out. You don't have to sit there and argue. If you know that you're only going to enhance the reputation and people's desire to work with you when you are honest enough to say, I'm not the best person to work with. I got somebody who's better in your particular situation. Why? Because as somebody who they're approaching as a trusted partner, as a guide in this process, what are they looking for? You have to have two things. The first one is you have to have empathy and understanding, which means the curiosity that you naturally bring to the table, my friend. The desire to learn and understand about the person, about their circumstances, about what they're trying to accomplish. You do all that naturally. You're a curious person and you want to know. So that when you sit there and listen and understand, that creates empathy, a relationship, an understanding between the two. That's the first piece. The second piece is authority. You have that because you've delivered consistently. The track record is there. They can speak to 5 other clients that you can rattle off. Here's 5 people, go talk to them. And they will give the glowing remarks that this person needs. So empathy and authority together are what people are looking for in a trusted resource, a partner, a guide, a navigator in this process, a counselor, a coach, a consultant, whatever the case might be. Call it what you will. They're looking for a guide. They're Luke Skywalker lost in the universe looking for Yoda. And so be Yoda. Don't try to be another Luke Skywalker. Too many people go into these relationships thinking that they're the hero of the story. What can I get out of this? But what was your question? How can I serve you? How can I help you? That's what a good guide does.
Yeah, and it is a challenge for younger people who don't have a track record, who haven't been there, done that, in order to try to build that reputation going forward. again, using LinkedIn, you can ask somebody to give a recommendation to post it on your LinkedIn profile. And you can build up as many of those as you think is appropriate from how many ever different flavors of who you are, about who you are, to build that up. You can get testimonials. You can work intentionally to build those kind of credibility. And there's different things that different people ascribe value to or trust to. It may be whether you wrote and published a peer-reviewed article in an academic journal. It may be because you got a certificate from an industrial association, a variety of things like that, where when you're early in your career, you should look for these banners or markers that say you've accomplished something. And
Right.
we often do that with a college degree or other types of educational institution things. But there are other things out there that show your commitment to your community, to the people you work with, things like that. And in some ways, you're building a metric system for your own personal evaluation.
Yeah.
And by doing that, one, it makes you more aware of how people see and value you, but it also can guide you in making choices between do you spend this weekend water skiing, at the lake, or do you go down and put in some time with a local charity, helping them sort medical supplies to go overseas, or I could name dozens of things I've done. And people go, oh, yeah, I saw you over here, or I know you worked with this charitable group, or you were a member of a commission or volunteered to help with a new governmental program of some kind. And these all become part of your experience, become part of who you are. But at the outset, your track record is so short, so small by comparison to one of us old guys who've been here doing stuff for so long that we forget about some of the stuff we've even done. So I think it is important, as you say, Kon, that how you present yourself during these engagements is very important. It's part of the reason I like LinkedIn Live. It's not only I get to see you, but it's a live interaction. It's not recorded. It's not like a podcast where everything's kind of a frozen moment in time. Now, people who didn't get to sit in on today's program can go see the recording. It's going to be on record, hopefully for longer than I care about, on LinkedIn and YouTube and Facebook. So you can go see the recording, but a recording's never quite the same as a live interaction, when you feel that even when you're in the audience, even when you didn't ask a question or make a comment, you still feel like you're part of what's going on. And that's what I really like about this is, getting comments from Zach and Don and Omar and anyone else who wants to join in. It changes the feeling of I'm part of this. And this helps, I think, create the inclusiveness, the feeling of being part of something that helps build this kind of a trust. So there's so many things I think you can do to build your own profile, build your own markers of trustworthiness. And at the same time, how you conduct yourself, particularly during that first engagement, first contact with the enemy, so to speak. How do you do that is going to be very much how you're measured going forward. They say you can only have one chance to make a first impression, and that's true. And we meet so many people that we don't get. We get lots of chances to make first impressions, so we have to get better at it as we go along. But I find that young people sometimes don't understand that they're kind of living in the moment on a day-to-day kind of a thing. They're not thinking of appearing before the queen and having their hair and everything in the right order. I think recommendation for younger people early in their career is think about how you're going to be viewed in the long term, Think about the fact that you are being judged every time, everywhere you do something,
Mhm.
and consider how you want to be judged, how you want to be viewed, how you want to be scored, and start looking for things you can do to verify, validate, or have a third party validate who you are.
Mhm. No, I agree with you, and that's goes back to the expression that I mentioned earlier. We all judge ourselves by our intention. Everybody else judges us by our actions, by what they see, and much of that interpretation will come from the observer's frame of reference and their worldview of things. And our worldview plays a big part in this. How we view the world based on our genetic predisposition emotionally and otherwise, and the experiences that we have, the formative experiences that have shaped us. So when we look at those things, I mean, people people's worldview will determine their frame of reference. Even the things they were talking about, the pace, the focus in their communication and their style. I mean, there are people that will see the world as a glass half empty or a glass half full, depending on who they are and their worldview of things. There are people that will put a greater emphasis on results and outcomes versus the relationships of how we got those results. Again, based on the worldview. And the combination of all these different elements is part of what shapes our profile, the archetypes that we fall in. And the sooner you recognize those patterns and the sooner you recognize those archetypes, the sooner you're going to be able to relate to those people and understand where you have commonalities or where you have to adjust your approach, your pace, and your focus in order to be able to relate to them a little bit better. But even with what you were talking about before, that young people don't, maybe they're not getting ready for the queen to sit in front of the queen or do it differently, but you see the changes in the generational perspectives. There was a time where sitting for a photograph was an all-day event. You would sit and you would prep. You would wear your Sunday clothes best. You would make sure that your hair, your makeup, everything was in place. Everybody looked so stiff and official because this was a big thing. Nowadays, we have an entire camera studio in our pocket that we walk around with. So the capturing of moments is much more spontaneous. People, rather than the proper way. I mean, in the past, you would look at this and say, well, that doesn't look very nice because it's not done right. I mean, they don't have the right people aligned and everything. It would be a lot more formal and structured. Nowadays, people value authenticity. They look for those goofy moments in order to be able to look at that and say, that's the human side of people. So the value of what we're looking for and what we interpret, what we want to see in people in order to think better of them changes over time. And much of that has to do with our worldview, about where we are, about the accessibility of things. I mean, you talk about the history of people, and sometimes young people don't have a history. Well, I came to this country 30 years ago. I already had an established track record as a professional, as an individual, as a human being. Um, but coming into this country, there was no record of me being in here. So when I went out, for example, I may have had thousands of dollars in my pocket. I couldn't buy bubble gum on credit because nobody knew me. When I went to get when I got my driver's license, even though I had a professional license elsewhere, I was still treated like a 16-year-old getting their permit for the first time because they didn't have a track record with me. When I went to get insurance, my insurance was ridiculous because, again, they had no record of my driving history. So people prefer having knowledge rather than not. And they would rather have knowledge of you failing than knowledge of you not doing anything, because that's a scary thing for a lot of these institutions. And because that's the way their algorithms work. Um, you look at even where we are right now with the LinkedIn and other platforms, they use the automation of their algorithm to try to tease out the things that they think that will be popular, that people will engage with, that people will find valuable, or things that are authentic and true. And they try to use all sorts of algorithms and machinations and automations to be able to do that. And so judging that is very, very hard. They're trying to replicate what we talked about with the human instinct and the way that we process things. But chasing the algorithm is a very hard and difficult thing to do. It's almost like the minute you think you've caught up with it, it's run off. It's like the dog that's chasing the car.
And I like the issue of authenticity that we are striving for through this program to let everybody kind of see us with our hair down. At least
Mhm.
I used to be able to say that back in Kansas. But
It's a
yeah,
luxury you
no,
don't have anymore, my friend.
it's gone. That's past. Um, but yeah, when we were younger, we had to get on your church clothes, okay, because we wanted to look proper
Correct.
when we were rolled out in front of the community for everybody to judge our parents on how good of a job of parenting they were
Right.
doing. And then when you work with certain people, they'd have a different persona. I remember one lady who worked with a news channel. She had her on stage presence, as you would call it, and her problem was that she would go into that persona, and then she sometimes wouldn't come out of that persona. And you're like, well, who am I talking to? Is Jekyll and Hyde, a schizophrenic kind of a thing?
Right.
And I know that I do that myself, that when I'm doing a presentation, I kind of step into a role or persona of I'm here to teach and hopefully you're here to learn and we'll all meet in the middle kind of a thing.
Mhm.
And at that point in time, I assume a lecture or a point of knowledge that is maybe adds a little authority to what I'm saying, a little strength to it, but it's a different thing than when we're just having a conversation like we are now. And I really like this about the LinkedIn Live. And I did podcasts for about 6 months. And we spent so much time trying to get everything perfect, the sound, the music, the editing, everything, that by the time you got done, it was no more authentic than a whole bunch of stuff that you don't care about. And you realize that, as you put it, Con, after 9/11 and doing a gazillion Zoom calls, you get to a point where your bullshit meter is
Mhm.
on high alert all the time.
Mhm.
And anytime somebody says anything that sounds like it's not real, it's not authentic, then you start stepping back and you start going, what is it they want out of me? I become suspicious, skeptical, and doing all those kinds of things. And so what I've found with this show and working as a guest on other people's show um, is, yeah, I did it again. For whatever reason, it loves to switch cameras on me. And it just kind of frustrates me when it does that. But um, we're we're back again
There we are.
to the camera. Why?
Speaking about authentic situations.
Yeah, no, it's what I love about doing these shows is it's just about when you get comfortable. Oh no, there it goes again.
Mm.
Um, but you're saying, well, I want people to know who I really am because that basically is where I'm going to be all the time. Even if I assume a persona, I'm
Mhm.
supposed to go to this party tonight to close out this conference. And we're all supposed to put on vintage ski gear from the 60s and 70s, and in the 60s, I was this big, and I'm not that old. Even though I am old, I'm not that old. And I'm like, okay, I wasn't skiing in the 60s. I actually never skied, I don't think, in the 70s until the very, very back end. So I'm going to go into a crowd and I'm going to put on a costume. And a lot of times we used to, I mean, early in my career, we always had coat and tie. And I was so happy when Governor Hickenlooper took office. First thing he took out was his tie and tossed it. And I'm like, yay, okay. I may disagree with you on so many different points, but I love that one because the tie disappeared, and I dislike ties, but I still occasionally will wear one because I'm trying to demonstrate what I think is an appropriate respect for whoever or whatever is going on. But that's not really me. Um, so showing authenticity, letting people see you and understand what is the real you, as they call it, I think it's more and more important today from the very moment that you meet someone to every engagement interaction with them. And it's something that is not present. I'm working with some people who are dealing with misinformation. This is going to be part of their business model, is moving from misinformation and biased information that's so prejudiced it has little resemblance to what's really going on. How do you deal with this on an ongoing basis when all this flood of stuff that's coming in today is to the far left, the far right, crazy this, crazy that, or somebody's peddling something that is going to make your hair grow back, or you lose weight, or something overnight. You get to a point where you start evaluating everything with this, I don't know, lie detector.
Yeah, and it's not just that, but you fall into the patterns of, if you're predisposed, like you said, to be a little bit cynical because you've been burnt, you have a lot of negative experience. It starts shaping your worldview. It starts shaping. It's going to take a lot more than just a cursory introduction to be able to regain that trust. If people have been burnt consistently on their investments, it's going to be hard to sell them on the idea that this is a sure thing. And so that's one thing. The other thing is that all of these forms of media and marketing, they're not going to convince you if you're not already predisposed to want to believe it, especially with some of the outlandish stuff that's out there. If you're not already willing to believe the person, if you're not already predisposed to accept that kind of information or imagery in your head, you're not going to accept it as easy. People are susceptible because they want to believe it. And that's something that we really need to take a good hard look at ourselves and say, okay, we are even more polarized. It's easy for these forms of communication to polarize us even more because we are already predisposed, already willing to go to the extremes. Um, when these kind of things, the trend is that we are moving to more extreme expressions of our beliefs and everything else. We've lost that middle ground, Carl. We've lost that ability to be empathetic and listen to other people, to say, okay, what is it that you're trying to say? I mean, what are the common grounds that we have? We all want something that we have in common. We all want the good for ourselves, for our families, for our country, for whatever else the case might be, for our society. It may be expressed and manifest differently, but we got to get away from this, that if you don't agree with me 100% of the time, that you're evil incarnate. I mean, that's ridiculous. We got to get away from that. And the tit for tat has to stop. I mean, a lot of these things have to stop. People, the media, the people that want to grab our attention, because attention is the new currency, are going to more and more extremes to get that attention, because we're starting to get to that point where we just can't give anymore. I mean, it's everything is a one liner, everything is a tweet or an X at this point, or everything is a hook, a title. We don't look beyond the titles anymore. We've lost our ability to have critical thinking, to go, yeah, it seems a little ridiculous to me. I don't think that that's the case. Or why would that be? Why would somebody behave that way? I mean, our ability to think critically has gone out the window because we've gotten so saturated and exhausted from all of this stuff. And it's just too much work to think anymore. And we've outsourced our ability to think to other people, to other entities. And that's a pretty dangerous thing. We're going to start walking around like mindless lemmings, just following people around because we are too lazy or too tired to think about things. It's just easier. And I'm sorry, but that's not who we are. That's not what got us here.
Yeah, so we're at the end of our hour for today. This has been an interesting back and forth over, what constitutes something that is worthy of trust, as you described it, Con. How do you present yourself so that people will trust you? What can you do in how you speak, how you talk, how you approach a topic, how you approach the person you're talking to. And if you're younger in your career, what can you do to shore it up or to take early steps to start building a reputation that you want to maintain and grow through the remainder of your career? There's so many things that can be done, but it seems they all center on being authentic and presenting yourself without layering yourself with a costume or a persona or something that isn't really who you are, because most people will see through that. And even though it's not necessarily a bad persona, it causes confusion. It makes your reputation fuzzier and more vague or ambiguous, which makes it harder for them to come to a level of trust and comfort with you. So, any last comment, Con, before we jump for today?
No, I just want to leave our audience with that thought that, you will always judge yourself based on your intentions. Everybody else would judge you by your actions. Make sure that those two are consistent in order to earn people's trust. Do what you say you're going to do, what your intent was. And if you're not hitting the mark, get feedback from people you do trust to let you know where the disconnect is.
Well, thank you for that, Con. Great last closing remarks for today. Thank you to our audience for being with us today. This is the Successful Funding Show. It's on every Tuesday morning at 10 o'clock Eastern, 8 o'clock Mountain Time. And we will have more guests in the future to talk about all the different elements, perspectives, and questions that come up in funding on just about anything. And I appreciate everybody being with